Cha- The Quiet Chaos Driving Me Mad, Chapter 2. One of the loudest groans to be produced by a human was then heard in my neighborhood, and I'm sure some of my neighbors were taken aback by hearing such a shriek of annoyance. I breathed a sigh next, and contemplated even texting her again. She's already with someone, so she won't let go of him to get with me. A guy that she doesn't even know much about at all. But then why would she give me her number? There has to be some way of me making it out of this with her interest, and she must believe I have some kind of potential to move to there. I paused as I realized I was arguing with myself when what would ultimately decide everything was in the hands of another person. Confronting her over what was troubling me, a choice that she made, seemed the thing that made the most sense. "Pardon me, but if you're already with another person, why'd you give me your number?" I texted. "I gave you my number because you sounded smart," she wrote back. The following moments were composed of me sitting there staring at that before I heard a knock on the door, followed by my father walking into the room in an apron and holding a large spoon with a smile on his face while he stepped over to me. "Food's ready," he announced. "We're having some macaroni, collard greens, carrot steak, and ham." "I'll come out soon," I told him. "What's wrong?" "That woman that gave me her number admitted she has a boyfriend and wrote she only gave it to me because she thought I sounded smart." "That doesn't sound like the biggest turn down I've ever heard." "Yeah, but now that means she gives her number to anyone that she thinks seems smart. Who knows how many secret men she's talking to that are lurking around." "Well, try talking to her and see what happens. If she says no, then let her go. She's just one woman." He walked out of the room next. I was glad that he voluntarily exited, as trying to find a way to get away from him during this whole thing might have proven difficult. I sent a text message to my best friend Trey before going to the kitchen to make a plate composed of the food my father had informed me of. After that was over and I returned to my room, I would estimate 3 or 4 minutes passed ahead of the doorbell ringing. I immediately rose to get to the door when I heard the ring, and I found that my mother had already arrived there. "We don't want any," she shouted while likely making an assumption about who was there. "I don't have any," a voice I recognized as Trey said from the other side, my mother then letting him into the house and him shaking her hand. "I'll make sure to have some during my next trip." He stepped past her and shook my hand. "Augustus," he said my name, "what's the deal? This thing with this woman." I pulled my phone out of my pocket and went to the text conversation with her, handing it to him. He spent the next few moments skimming over the messages while following me back to my room, where he sat on the floor staring at the phone. "So some woman that was dating someone gave you her number? That's exactly what happened. How about you ask her if she wants to call?" I moved over to him and took the phone. "Sent it," I said. We engaged in some small talk about events outside of getting love or women or whichever way one could refer to this as. He told me about his own troubles and reminded me of how much we had in common. Even if I swear myself off as the guy who's more likely to open a book or try learning about something of my own, Trey was neutral enough to talk about most things with. "So has any of that political stuff had something important happen this week?" "Not to where I'd want to bore you with details." "Fair enough." He looked at me as though waiting on something. "Well, give me some kind of summary," Trey said with a smile. We talked about that for a bit too. After our conversing on that subject ended maybe 15 minutes after he requested the summary, I changed the subject again. "I just don't get why you take the number from a guy that isn't yours when you have a guy. She might be looking for a way out. Couldn't she just take a tunnel?" "I meant a different way of finding love. Maybe the guy she's with is mean and she's scared to end it, so she looks for other guys to talk to get the friendship she wants out of a relationship." I nodded my head. "Maybe I've been looking at this from my angle way too much all along. So just try talking to her and see what happens. Are you doing the itty-bitty messages again?" "No, my dad doesn't know what he's talking about. You remember what happened with that one chick that wanted longer messages?" "I do." "Then do whatever you think can work. Do you think I should send longer ones?" "It's a double-edged sword. Some people appreciate the effort. Others get turned off by having to read too much." I'm going to bank on her appreciating the effort. After saying that, I typed her a new message. "So in an attempt to get to know you better, maybe you could tell me about some stuff you do outside of work, such as hobbies and things you're into when you don't have to do them." Following that message being sent, Trey and I walked out of my bedroom and to the dinner table to eat with my family. The meal that my father prepared A very large bowl of tomato soup added to it was sizable enough for each of us to get a plate full before the six of us sat at the table together. There was small talk that sounded the same as every other day, and some banter that could probably be switched out with any of its predecessors from the days prior. Someone once told me that life was a circle that spinned in the same spots, with the only difference being who it was and what day happened to be the one in which this pattern developed. It is now many years later, and I have come to the same belief. Once done eating the red stuff in the bowl that my father had somehow managed to make taste more like ketchup one could acquire from a fast food restaurant, Trey wiped his face with a small white sheet and stepped away from the table on the premise of using the bathroom. No one objected to him doing this, of course. At least we run the risk of having a pool of yellow seize the floor. I was about 7 or 8 gulps from being done with my soup as well. There was a temptation on my end to just swallow the entire thing. I decided against doing that mainly to not upset my father, who admittedly had worked hard, and because there wasn't much to do when it was just my parents, my siblings, and myself. I felt the vibration of my phone receiving a notification and looked to it. "I'm into a whole lot of stuff," Shannon replied. There's stuff like running, singing, dancing, and music. I would think that music, dancing, and singing would fit into one category, but the spaced out feeling I had from the three being separated was not enough to diminish my interest in her. I ate the rest of the soup, thanked my father for making it, and returned to my bedroom. I was thinking of what kind of message I wanted to send back to her when Trey walked into the room. Good job on waiting her out for a few minutes, Trey said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "My dad said he doesn't think women like it when you respond to them quickly. So should I wait a couple of days or weeks? Nobody told me I shouldn't try to talking to them too much or too often." "Has that been successful for you?" "No." "Then you could probably be well suited writing it off. That's what I do with a lot of the stuff my father says." The following 2 hours consisted of the two of us watching some television while I decided to put off sending a message to Shannon. "It's getting pretty late," Trey said. "I'll see it in a few days," I told him, "and I'll send you a text before then." With his departure from my home and my closing the front door of the house behind him, I returned to my bedroom, and I turned the television off and sat in silence. How am I going to keep her interest, I thought. Maybe I'll just respond back to her with something simple. That should do the trick. It's not as though anyone would favor a man who overthinks himself. Within moments, I typed the response. "That all sounds very cool. Maybe we could have a phone call about it when you're not busy." "I went online using my phone," she responded seconds later. "I don't like talking on the phone," she wrote. One could say that I shouldn't have focused on this response, but I saw no other view than to perceive it as incredulous. In an era where it has never been easier to talk to someone by voice, you're going to regulate us to speaking solely through the confines of text, where serious things I might say are more likely to be misinterpreted as a result of not being able to hear the tone I'm taking when composing a response. The mood that message put me in as it pertained to her was not one for which I believed civil communications could continue. I held off from responding to her and sent Trey a message. "She says she doesn't want to talk by phone," I wrote. "Send her a telegram," he replied. "What do you think about her doing this? She probably doesn't want to get to know you. I can't think of anyone that I'm that big on who I didn't speak with mostly by voice." That was the same argument I was going to make to her. The problem is she'll either get offended to the point of not wanting to talk anymore or deny it. Maybe you should just leave her alone. That's running through my mind, but I just met her. Maybe she'll break up with this guy if I hold out long enough. That could happen, but do you want to find yourself holding on and hoping she does something you have no reason to believe she'll do? The back and forth had by that point gone on for about 20 minutes. Every time there was a slight delay in messaging on his part, I would go back to reviewing the messages between Shannon and myself. When a half an hour passed, I became convinced that he was not going to send anything for the remainder of the night. After turning the television on, I went to take a shower. Retiring for the night within the same hour, woke that morning, as I always did, to a darkened room devoid of noise but filled with peace. A sense of stability and continuity I never felt when I slept anywhere else. I heard the sound of footsteps through the hallway, and after getting dressed in day clothing, looked outside to see who it was. My father was marching back and forth, and I had come to see him in the act. "Go back to bed, Augustus," he told me. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm trying to get your mom to notice me." "What? I don't think she likes me anymore. Is this a joke?" No, the real deal. I walked back into my bedroom, and I could hear the sound of a recognizable feminine voice confronting my father in the hallway over what he had done. Part of me thought it was my mother, but I didn't like to confirm things until I knew for sure. We're all trying to relax, and you're disturbing that my mother shouted in a single stroke of irony. I would continue to lampoon her for having missed the point of her own message in her delivery, but it seems she understood the mixed signals her message might invoke when she looked at me in a cautious way, once noticing that I was staring at her. There was a slight change in her expression when she moved to stand closer to me, enough to where she could place her mouth to my ear and speak in a quiet voice with her words being audible. "So how's Shannon?" she asked. "Taken and not willing to speak by voice," I said. "She doesn't do phone calls. She doesn't do phone calls. You'll just have to text." I made the same conclusion. Part of me thinks you should stop talking to her. Part of me feels that way too. My father would probably think otherwise. You know how idealistic he is, thinking that women will leave their men if you do enough. She said that while pointing her eyes in the direction of her bedroom. My father was presently located in as though to signal her disdain toward this attitude of his. "Well, excuse him for trying," I said, quietly laughing right after. "There are some things and some people that can't be made different than how they already are," she told me. "But what if what they are isn't good? Then the damage is irreversible." She walked in the direction of the kitchen, and her footsteps, though no longer as visible as she walked through an intermediate room, made it apparent that was where she was going. I stood in place for a few moments, my mind at work, and walked back to my room. There I looked on my phone and found a message. "Are you going to respond?" LOL, Shannon wrote. I smiled. It slipped my mind, I wrote. "I was just caught up in this thing yesterday that got me carried away." "Ah, okay. Are you going to do anything today?" "Just going to a block party." "I'm assuming you're going by yourself." "Yeah, I can't think of anybody I'm close enough to want to go with."